Hiya, I want to talk to you about sales and startups today, and specifically about how sales can make or break a new business. Recently I was asked what I thought are the most important key actions to take when setting up a new business. And so I did what anyone else would do. It's been a long time since I started up my business, so I looked up what the statistics are today on what fails people and where people should focus efforts to prevent them falling down. The stats are quite shocking. Now, according to experts, in the US, 20% of new businesses will fail in their first year and 30% by the end of year 2. In the UK, it's worse. 80% of businesses fail in their first year. These are pretty scary numbers, especially for the UK. So I dived in further to understand why, and it seems that marketing is the key culprit. Failing to understand the market and how your offering fits into it is an area that startups simply are not paying enough attention. So, as a sales trainer and a business owner myself, I want to share with you some tips on how I think you could make your startup more successful. Tip number 1, know your offering inside out. You cannot just sell an idea that you had in your head because it works in your head. You have to know why anyone else would ever want to invest in it. To do that, you have to break it down like I showed you in my value proposition video. So look at your product, list the features, and then list all the potential benefits. From this, understand who can benefit from it and how. Think about the users and the stakeholders. If you haven't seen the value proposition video that I put out, then I have put a link to it in the description for this one to make it easy for you to find. Have a look at it because I think it will help. Tip number 2, know the marketplace. Now, before I picked up the phone to sell training when I started my business, I remember calling out to other businesses across all sectors who have sales teams, and I asked them what they felt they needed from training providers, and specifically what they needed for their business. But I didn't just speak to stakeholders or the people buying the training. I spoke to salespeople, I spoke to the sales managers, and I spoke to HR. And I did that so I could form an understanding of what each type of different buyer would want from me. Now, depending on your offering, perhaps you could run focus groups or reach out to experts in the field, asking them for their feedback. The feedback you're searching for is anything that might suggest an improvement to your offering, or even a way that you can position your offering to highlight the advantages you have over the competitors. I remember how business owners told me that they love to have sales training, but with it being 2008 and the start of a recession, they were pretty reluctant to pay as much as they were used to paying for it. This just gave me all the ammunition I needed to position myself so I could reflect real value in my offering. Number 3, understand the buyer process and align your sales approach to it. Now that you know the different types of buyers that you're going to be approaching, you really need to ensure that your value proposition is adaptable or adjustable to all of them. Again, refer back to my value proposition video for this because it will help. Let me give you a couple of examples of what I mean. Let's just say you're in construction and the buyer is a specifier, because in construction it could be a specifier, an end user, or the actual construction project manager. But with a specifier, you will probably find that they're more receptive when you speak to them about reliability, functionality, and the aesthetics. Similar with, let's say, IT. If your buyer is an IT manager whose role is to integrate, let's say, a new CRM system, in which case then you're going to want to talk to them more about friendliness or flexibility, because that will probably appeal to them more. If your buyer, however, is a commercial director, then you probably want to discuss the return on investment in more direct terms such as costs, profitability, and productivity. Tip number 4, once you have the knowledge of both your offering and the marketplace, plan your sales approach. But you need to do this using the old 80-20 rule. 80% of your market will give you quick wins that are lower in value but guaranteed bread and butter income. 20% of the market will probably give you high value deals, which could account for, let's say, up to 80% of your sales value. But they will be fewer and harder to achieve. These are what I would call the luxury meals, and you can't rely on them alone. So you really need to identify both types of customer and start to map your approach and activity levels for each of them. Whatever you do, Don't spend all your time chasing those luxury deals. You really do have to balance them, because if you don't, you'll miss out on the bread and butter deals. And they're called bread and butter deals because they're the ones that'll keep you alive. So if you just sit around waiting for the big ones, you will fail. And finally, number 5, set yourself some key performance indicators so that you can manage your investment and your return. Whatever it is, whatever kind of investment it is, whether it's you and your time, or it's a purchase, whatever, or marketing that you've purchased, whatever it is, you must set some measures and benchmarks so that you do make sure you get a return. In startups, you really have to remember that each piece of equipment you've invested in to set up that business has given you a reason to make some money back, a reason to sell. So if you're not selling, then you have to be prepared to look at each of those investments and scrutinize it to see if it was a good idea in the first place. And if it's something you can't go back on, then you have to make it work better for you. You need to be able to do that using performance measures with benchmarks. And to begin with, performance measures, if you haven't got the experience of what those measures should be like from a previous role, then to start with, they will just be guidelines on what you think you should be achieving. But as time goes on, you will be able to adapt those benchmarks to be more realistic to work for you. So for example, let's say you set yourself so many cold calls in a day, but you very quickly realize that you can't make that many cold calls in a day realistically, because you're trying to run your business and you've got other areas to focus on. So that's fine. Then what you should do is just adjust that number to be more realistic. And then after that, you can start to look at how well those calls are converting into meetings or next steps in the sales process. And also then, if they're not converting, then it gives you something else to start thinking about in terms of what you should be adjusting, what you should be working on improving. Perhaps it's what you're saying, perhaps it's just your value proposition, or even just the approach that you're using. I will release a video on how to measure using KPIs soon, because I think it's important to expand on, and I think it will really help you. So do look out for it. Okay, so those are my top level tips for how you can become a successful startup and avoid the black holes for failure. There are many more tips that you can pick up though, because I went to CB Insights and that's where I got the statistics. So you can go there, or you can go to Alexa, Siri or Google. They always point you to the right direction too. But whatever you do, don't just dive in before you know what you're fishing for and what kind of bait to use. That's it guys, thank you for watching once again. If you found this valuable, please do share it, and hey, if you haven't subscribed, that would be great. It always encourages me to keep sharing, keep making more of these sales training videos and sharing them with you. And thank you for the lovely comments that I've been getting too. Okay, till next time, stay safe.